Okie dokie. So if you've been playing Dune Awakening, you have probably heard of the big scary words deep desert. And Reddit and other weird content creators have probably led you to believe that if you go out into the deep desert, you're going to be chased by some big evil guild with 20 ornithopters that are going to rocket you out of the sky. I am here to tell you that that is sort of true, but the fear you have about that is completely fucking irrational. A lot of you think that if you go into the deep desert, you're going to end up losing your ornithopter. Not only have I tested out exactly how much damage it takes to down an ornithopter in terms of how many rockets. Okay, go ahead and shoot. But we also have a couple tips for you in terms of making sure that you will never, ever, as long as you follow these rules, lose your ornithopter in the deep desert. Not even if you get eaten by a worm. First up, let's talk about vehicle armor. If you have watched my armor video and damage reduction video, it works identically on vehicles as it would to your armor on yourself. The difference is the armor of a vehicle piece is only for that piece. So it doesn't work as a composite. Say you have 4 Mark V Ornithopter wings. Those, I believe, have 1,000 armor each. That 1,000 armor does not add together to give your vehicle 4,000 armor. That's not even close to how that works. The armor is for its own individual piece. Pardon my empty research tree. This is a new character on a new server. Went to a different world where a friend of mine was, Lambo from First Descendant, and he helped me do a lot of these tests. When it comes to vehicle armor, and this is something really important to clarify, because say you go and look at the Mark V Ornithopter, and then you go and look at the stats for the generator, the engine, all that stuff. Those stats technically on the engine and the generator will say that there is no armor on those parts. This is a lie. The way to determine how much armor those parts have is to just look at the armor of the other pieces in the set. For example, every vehicle piece in the duraluminum tier will have 1,250 armor, whereas every piece of vehicle in the aluminum tier will have 1,000 as opposed to duraluminum, which is 1,250. So the vehicle armor scales perfectly, adding 250 per tier. Now, because we know how armor works, we're able to derive, basically, how much health every single part has. Because that's another problem. If you go and look at the ornithopters in their vehicle menu or in their research stats, nowhere in there does it state their health. And if you've shot an ornithopter a few times or different vehicles, you're able to see that sometimes, even though you're dealing the same damage to one part versus another part, the other part takes more durability loss. And the reason for that is because durability is basically health, and some parts have less health than others. But using the armor equation that we have, and testing by shooting a gajillion different pieces, we broke probably 4 different bikes completely, down to 0 durability, and 2 different ornithopters, and then a full assault ornithopter as well, in order to get these results that we're using here. Before we get into how many shots it takes to break each part of an ornithopter, we need to clarify one extremely important thing. Rockets do have AoE. They have an area of effect. They have a radius of the explosion, right? But if you shoot a vehicle, even if they're within the center of the AoE, a common myth right now is that every single part that is within the explosive radius of the rocket will take damage. This is wrong. Only one single part will. Just one. And on an ornithopter, you have the hull, the chassis, the cockpit, the engine, 4 wings, and a generator. If you get hit by a rocket, only one of those is actually getting damaged. Probably step number 1 to putting your fears to rest on how quickly you guys think that your ornithopter can be shot out of the sky. Because holy shit, guys, it's not fast. With that established, another thing to clarify, and this is based on all the testing between breaking a gajillion different vehicles several times, the generator and the engine cannot be hurt at all until at least one hull type object is broken. So on the Scout Ornithopter, if the cockpit breaks completely, goes down to 0 durability, or if the hull goes down to 0 durability, then and only then can the generator or the engine actually be hurt. So a lot of people are concerned that, you know, they'll get their generator sniped or some shit like that. No, it takes a lot of rockets to break some hull component, and then your internal components can actually receive damage. Another common misconception is that if you have one wing broken, you can't fly fly anymore. That's wrong. You can actually fly still with 3 wings broken. It's not going to be as effective, but you can still fly. So if you are in the deep desert and you do happen to run into the big evil guild of misery and destruction, and they have 20 ornithopters after you, there's not only ways to get away from them, but also, in general, it takes a lot more to take your vehicle out of the sky than you would think. Now let's talk about how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, or how many rockets it takes to actually start breaking any given part on an ornithopter. I'm not going to be reading off the amount of rockets it takes to break a Mark IV ornithopter in the deep desert, because the general assumption here is that if you are going into the deep desert, you have worked up to the duraluminum tier, and you have at least a Mark V Scout ornithopter. That is just the baseline, and I'm talking all the parts, not just the wings to go a little faster, all the parts, so that way you have more armor. And if you've watched the armor video, you understand why armor is really fucking important. Quick note, the number of rockets that it takes to break each part, I'm assuming you're being shot by a Mark VI Scout Ornithopter with the Mark VI rocket launcher attachment to it, because that does the most damage short of upgrading to an Assault Ornithopter. But if you're in a Scout Ornithopter, you're going to be able to run away from an Assault Ornithopter, no problem. When it comes to a Mark V Scout Ornithopter, on the whole, it would take 8 rockets to break a hole, and that means it would take 8 rockets before they could even start to damage your generator or your engine. Not only that, but rockets do not track. Rockets are dumb fire, meaning they have to be aimed manually. A chassis would take 17 rockets. A cockpit would take 8, the engine would take 8, and the generator would take 9. Every individual wing would take 5 rockets per wing in order to break them. As for how people can target an individual piece, it's not that simple. While the rocket will connect with an ornithopter, the person has no choice over which actual part of the ornithopter is going to take the explosive damage. So to put this in perspective, obviously it will take fewer rockets than this to knock you out of the sky, but if we sum the total number of rockets that it would take to completely break every single part of your ornithopter, it would be 66 fucking rockets. That is a shit ton. Not only that, but a lot of people are under the impression that if they're getting ganked like that, you're just kind of screwed, right? Wrong. If you are in a scenario, say you're landed, say you're not in the sky. If you're landed and people are coming at you, the first thing you should do in the deep desert is put away your ornithopter. And yes, that does mean not taking storage. Because if you put away your ornithopter, you will never lose it. The vehicle backup tool is universal. It's not just you have a vehicle backup tool for this vehicle and a vehicle backup tool for this vehicle. That is a single universal backup tool. So let's say you're out in the deep desert, you land and you start picking up some spice, and you put away your ornithopter, as you should, and then someone comes by and snipes you or some shit, I don't know, and you die. Somehow, mistakenly, you die. Let's say you even get eaten by the worm out there. You still don't lose your ornithopter, and it's because you backed it up. You can respawn back in your base, even in the Haga Basin. Pull out another vehicle backup tool, and it will be there. It's not like the Solito Replicator, where the Solito Replicator, you need 1 for every base you make a blueprint of. The vehicle backup tool has 1 backup only, and that is it. So the number 1 rule of Deep Desert, if you're going in alone, especially, always back up your fucking ornithopter. The moment you land, never leave it exposed. You never have to worry about people picking it up with a carrier ornithopter and dropping it off in a fucking worm's mouth. You never have to worry about the ornithopter getting eaten in general, and you never have to worry about people nuking it out of existence, because it will be in your mystical, magical, space-time defying box that just picks up a fucking ornithopter. I don't really understand the vehicle backup tool that much, but whatever. And that's the other thing. If you are going into the deep desert alone, take a fucking booster. Do you want to know why? Because everyone else out in the deep desert has rockets. You're going to be able to gain altitude faster than them, and because boosters are not subject to the same fuel requirements at higher altitudes as engines are, that means anyone chasing you with rockets will run themselves out of fuel just trying to climb high enough to meet you and shoot rockets at you. Meanwhile, you with your boosters will be able to continually evade them. It is literally just a war of attrition. As long as you're able to get your boosters up and start climbing, no one will be able to catch you, period. And just to clarify, in case somehow people are not aware of this, even though we've talked about it before, the Scout Ornithopters, which are the big meta right now, and supposedly that's going to change, Scout Ornithopters can only have storage or boosters or rockets. And that's why I say, if you do have boosters, the other people are never going to fucking catch you. You don't have to worry about it at all. It's literally free. Now, someone's going to tell me, well, Vash, if I don't take storage, then how could it possibly be worth it? If you do take storage and get shot down, how would that be worth it anyways? You have 2 options when it comes to solo deep desert play. You either sneak in with storage, and if you do successfully get out, that's great. But then if you do get shot down, I never want to hear a complaint, because if you do take storage on your Scout Ornithopter, you're a greedy motherfucker, and you need to know that. The deep desert was not meant for solo players. You can survive, but you need to be a rat bastard. You need to be sneaky. You need to be fast, faster than everyone else. Everyone else out there is just trying to shoot you down, but you will live with a booster. Will you live with a fucking storage unit on your Ornithopter? No guarantees. And speaking of the differences between the Assault Ornithopter and then the Scout Ornithopter, is they also shoot at different rates with their rocket launchers. The Assault Ornithopter does do more damage per shot, but they also shoot a lot fucking slower. Another thing to remember is that in the deep desert, you do not have full render distance. People are able to basically jump scare each other with encounters. My friend Lamb, he had an encounter where he and his group were out and about, and then all of a sudden a carrier ornithopter rendered in front of him, and then several other ornithopters popped in. And this is actually a really funny encounter that I want to talk about, because this is the perfect example of greed. And I hope anyone who takes storage on their Scout Ornithopter as a solo player, which is batshit insane, into the deep desert can understand this. They ran into this carrier ornithopter. The first thing this carrier ornithopter should have done is, after seeing they were greatly fucking outnumbered, they should have dropped the sand crawler that they were carrying. That should have been the first fucking move on their end. And if they'd done that, they would have gotten out of there alive and with all of their vehicles intact. The reason for which is the main reason people go and raid in the deep desert is they're trying to steal your shit. If you, on a carrier ornithopter, have a giant spice-filled fucking sand crawler and you drop it in the middle of the desert, anyone who's coming after you is immediately going to leave you the fuck alone and go get the spice that you just dropped before a worm gets it and it's all gone. Because if they don't get anything, that wasn't even worth it. But instead, in this clip, they decided to greed. They held on to the sandcrawler till the last second. And then even after crash landing, because they got shot with so many rockets that they fucking completely crash landed. Their carrier ornithopter couldn't fly anymore. And instead of trying to quickly repair the carrier ornithopter, they still greeded and tried to go dismantle the sandcrawler instead of just getting the fuck away. And because they sat there and greeded for the sandcrawler, my friend Lamb set down a thumper, and that thumper called a worm which ate their carrier. Now they have no means of leaving. Now they're fucked. Is he a piece of shit in terms of PvP? Probably, but that's the gameplay that's available to him right now. The people he fought made their choice, and they chose greed. And you guys have to understand that it's not impossible for solo players to make things work in the deep desert. It might be impractical, but it can absolutely be fucking done. Just remember, if you want to make sure, if you want to guarantee that you survive, play like a rat, use a booster, tuck away your fucking ornithopter in a backup tool the moment you land anywhere. If you are getting shot out of the sky, it doesn't matter if your ornithopter is burnt to a crisp, by the way. You can still pick it up with your backup tool, and then you can place it down later. Make sure that you do pick it up and place it back down, because if there are parts that are completely broken, it'll say that they can't be repaired, but if you pick it up and then put it back down, then they can suddenly be repaired. The only exception to this is the chassis. If the chassis went down to 0 durability, you have to get a new chassis, but the other parts can always be saved. So just play like a rat, pick up your fucking ornithopter whenever you can. You will never lose it. The deep desert is not nearly as scary as any of you have been led to believe.